This has been a season of memes as we've all retreated into our homes and tried to figure out how to connect with one another while not leaving those houses. This is one of my favorites that has popped up from this season, Apocalypse Bingo. The original image is from a children's movie called The Emperor's New Groove. Kronk, the character here, is playing a different sort of bingo, but he kind of misses the point. He's the big, dumb guy, generally. Most of you know, I hope by now, that I believe very firmly in the plural of apocalypse, apocalypses, that there are many things in human history that change the world. And they change the world in such a way that there's a clear before and after. And that is an apocalypse, not that the world ends completely, but that things shift so radically, we have a before and an after. I say that because when I make jokes about the apocalypse, if you don't get the nuance, it sounds more than a little harsh. But even if you believe in the plural of apocalypse, that there are apocalypses in human history, it doesn't mean they're less difficult to live through. As we are experiencing firsthand, it is in fact a very, very difficult season. This year gets all of the jokes of its own, everything that happened in 2020. And I went back and looked as we were thinking about this Sunday, partly just because I realized I don't even remember. I barely remembered that there was an ongoing Persian Gulf crisis in early 2020, left over from 2019, an assassination of an Iranian leader. There was an earthquake in Puerto Rico early in the year. There was an impeachment trial of our own president early in the year that resulted in people saying, yes, we impeach him, but not removal. Mitt Romney is in fact making different headlines for breaking ranks and voting for removal. Not long after that, Ahmaud Arbery is killed, a young black man launching protests. Breonna Taylor is killed later in her home while she was sleeping, launching even more protests about violence against African Americans in this country. We've heard more and more the echo, Black Lives Matter. By the time those events are happening, COVID-19 is becoming a reality, and so most of the country is entering a lockdown, including here in Arizona. For a very brief time, oil is worthless as demand plummets. And box offices record zero revenue for the first time ever. When they begin recording again, the returns they get, the revenues they get, are from two tiny drive-in theaters. The U.S. Space Force launched its first satellite. It also became a show on Netflix, and we haven't heard much about our Space Force lately. By May, there's stories of murder hornets, also known as Agent Giant hornets, threatening us and our bee population. May also begins a tropical storm season with the most storms in the Atlantic Ocean in history, at least since they started naming them. The naming protocols for storms are that we move through the alphabet. They have 21 names for each season in alphabetical order for different oceans. And the Atlantic Ocean went through all 21 letters. Now, if you're paying attention, you might have heard of the storm Eta, because they went to the Greek alphabet, made it to the 7th letter already by the time I'm recording this. The George Floyd protests came in May, and we're hanging out here in Arizona in record high heat. We set records this year not so much for how hot it got singularly, but how hot it stayed. The most consecutive days of 90, of 100, even of 110. And the truth is, that's a pretty short list. I skipped over a lot and missed a lot, and some things I was like, whoa, I don't even remember that happening. But here we are. Here we are, and I am recording this on Friday afternoon, not even knowing how the presidential election ends up. I believe we're calling this Election Day Part 4 at this point. And part of the reason that we don't know where this ends is because of undermining confidence in the election process. Something that we were warned back in mid-September was happening. The FBI director warned on September 17th of interference to undermine confidence in the process by Russia, not just in the US. And so we come to 2020 and we make jokes because we all know that if you had sat in an interview, say, in 2015 and answered the question, where will you be in 5 years? You were most definitely wrong. Those changes, as deeply they've affected our day-to-day life, we know have also deeply affected church. We now log on to devices instead of walking through doors. You have communion with whatever you have on hand. There are no snacks to discover when you come in the door. There's singing, but not together, not in the way we're used to. And we know that we had different hopes for this year. We had hopes for talent shows and game nights. We have hopes for the ways we would spend time together. We had hopes for baseball games or basketball games or all kinds of things. And as I record this in one of the classrooms, I am well aware that while I might have been open to God's call to be a televangelist, I really, really thought that that would come with some people to handle the production side. But here we are. You've heard me say by now that church is about playing the long game. We're learning the gospel, and that takes a while, and we're also open to the possibility that we might be awakened to it in a new way at any time. One of my favorite stories in Scripture, or at least the most moving, is when Jesus waits in the final days of his life. He goes to pray in the Garden of Gethsemane. He leaves the disciples outside the garden and goes in to pray. Some of the Gospels say he prays, "Let this cup pass from me." Some of them say he sweat drops of blood. And when he goes back, he finds the disciples sleeping. He wakes them and he chastises them. "Could you not wait with me even an hour?" In that scenario, it would seem that Jesus knew they're going to have to wait longer. In a few days, they're going to have to wait 3 days, not just an hour. And the disciples in that time managed to go back to their labor instead of waiting. For me, it is one of the deep marks of being a Christian, being faithful, is to remain present, to remain somehow with each other when things are most difficult. We wait the hour, the 3 days, the even longer, no matter how difficult things are. And I think Paul, when he began his more commentary writing that we have in letters, I think Paul knew that when he said, "Rejoice in hope, be patient in suffering, persevere in prayer." I think he knew that the season of waiting, the season of getting through things, the uncertainty was just beginning. As I read Paul's words, "Rejoice in hope, be patient in suffering, persevere in prayer," I might want to reorder them if left to my own devices. First, be patient, then persevere, and then maybe we get to rejoice. With the rejoicing comes even the possibility of hope, hoping for something else. But here is what I know that we did. We did to be patient, to persevere, to rejoice. In the midst of everything, we worshiped and we cared for one another. We tended to the needs of our homeless neighbors. Just this weekend, we made sure that they were fed and cared for, even though they're in another building. We provided food, we provided sanitizing items, including when the sanitizing items were really hard to find. We provided masks to Ascend, who manages the iHelp program, to neighbors in the Navajo Nation, deeply affected by the pandemic. And let's not forget that we stayed home. In a season when there's a virus going around that is spread primarily through human contact, a deep, deep act of love, and especially love of neighbor far and near, is to stay home. We started with staying home thinking it would be a few weeks, and now we're on months. And the truth is, that is what perseverance looks like. It's what patience looks like. And so, like everything else in 2020, our financial campaign looks different this year. We hope to get pledges to know what we're going to be basing next year's budget on. You've already gotten an email, I hope. Email sometimes a little less reliable. You should have also gotten a letter in the mail either last week or coming soon. That included a document with this year's budget, with where we are. One of them looks very nice and clean. The other thing is exactly the same, except I wrote all over it, hoping that that would help you understand some. And you're always, always welcome to ask questions. Again, we're not to budget yet, not to budget for 2021, but we wanted to tell you, both myself and leaders of the church, where we are as we look to next year. Where we are in terms of income we've received, what that looks like against our budget, where we will be by the end of the year. So as we look to next year, you should know we're not alone. That letter names the fact that we are experiencing diminished rental income. Many of our groups have either stopped meeting completely or meeting in very small numbers. They also value our partnership, and so even if they're not in our building, that doesn't mean they're gone. The legislative district that holds their meetings here has continued to pay rent. Our many AA groups have continued to give us rental income, even as they met in very small numbers and largely over Zoom. They treat us as not just a building, but also are invested in our presence and our ministry here. When you look at that document, you will see a number, $13,717, that was part of the PPP loan, or Paycheck Protection Program. We got that as part of the stimulus package back in May. At this point, we are waiting on forgiveness of that loan. They are prioritizing forgiveness of loans under $50,000. Our information was submitted this past week. Forms have been changing, and so the bank had told us to wait a little, but we filled that out once we were told to do so. If you look at our budget versus actuals, you will see that the PPP loan is providing a financial cushion. We'd be pretty worried about finances by the end of the year if it weren't there. But we also know that that's what it was supposed to do. It was supposed to give small businesses a financial cushion and the ability to pay employees even when revenue was uncertain. So once we find out about forgiveness, that continues as a cushion. We will continue to receive income because we know that you have been faithful. But we also know that we're looking at an uncertain future. We don't know what happens with COVID-19. We're still waiting on presidential returns that can change lots of things. But still, we are faithful people. We are the ones who are patient and persevering. We are the ones who choose to wait, to watch, and to be faithful in that. So please take a look at your letters. Take a look at your pledge card. Consider the gifts that Chalice has shared with you during this difficult season, the gifts we have shared with our neighbor. And please consider your pledge for next year with all of those things in mind. We're hoping you'll return pledge cards by next Sunday, November 15th, not February. And you can do so electronically or by mailing the card you've been mailed back to us. But I hope you will do all of that with resurrection hope, trusting beyond everything else that the hardest thing is never the last thing. And we will surely be together through and after this apocalypse. Amen.